Welcome to Medal of Honor, above and beyond.
You know that a game is not going to start out very well when you listen to that at the very beginning of it. And I just kind of want to point out how silly it is to have the game's title read to you by a lady who sounds like she's come out of an infomercial trying to sell you something. Because you've had to pay at least, let's be generous and say $300. This is the really low end. This is like buying a used Oculus Quest or maybe a Windows mixed reality headset from the first generation, right? Imagine having to hear that, and then imagine having to buy that, then buying a $60 US game, and then starting up that $60 US game and hearing that, like you'd just come out of someone trying to sell you something. It just feels weird, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, and that's kind of my entire experience with Medal of Honor Above and Beyond is just kind of weird. And that's the most disappointing thing about it, because despite the fact that this game's got a weird bunch of problems, some of which they are not only dedicated to fixing, but are fixing really fast, it's actually pretty good when you get right down into it. So for those of you who don't know, if you've been living under a rock for, say, I don't know, 15 years, although then again, they have tried to reboot Medal of Honor into a modern shooter recently, and it was frankly laughable. But if you've been paying attention for a little while, this has been a World War II shooter series. It was originally directed, I think, by Steven Spielberg. I'm pretty sure he had something to do with it. I'd be lying if I said I knew the specifics, but they were really good back in the day. And the developers of one of the best Medal of Honor games went on to make the first Call of Duty game. And if that doesn't tell you what sort of a legacy this sort of series leaves behind, I don't know what will. So, Respawn Entertainment got to take on the series in a VR format. And it is more or less what it looks like. It is a World War II first-person shooter. It's apparently got a long campaign, a survival mode, a full-on multiplayer mode, and a bunch of other little things on the side, including what I thought was really interesting, a massive gallery full of things like 360-degree videos of things like Normandy, interviews with veterans that they used to make the game, and they actually have a lot that's going on in the way of interesting gameplay mechanics. So, for any of you who've actually played a VR first-person shooter before, specifically games like, say, Pavlov or Onward, you would know that these guns tend to require you to do some, not so much intense things, but they often require you to load it, pull back the slide. When it comes to loading, say, a light machine gun, they have you open the top, put in the ammo box, make sure it's threaded through properly, drop it, pull back the slide. But this game takes a slightly different approach to it, where as long as you get the magazine into the right spot for the most part, the gun will automatically reload. So it actually simplifies the gameplay quite a bit. Meanwhile, making it a bit more complicated, because you don't have regenerating health, but you have it up to a point. But if you take damage beyond, say, half your health bar, you'll be stuck in the second half until you use a health syringe. So you'll be purposefully weak until you manage to successfully heal yourself. And I reckon it's a really neat idea, and the gunplay in this game is actually quite good. Because you've got these bloody Nazis swarming you from every direction sometimes. The guns themselves feel pretty good. They've got some good kickback to them. They sound great, except for the M1 Garand, which had some problems with the volume of the clip. However, I've noticed that outside of like the environmental detail going on, some of these guns look a little bit weird. Their textures look basically just like flat slabs with very little in the way of actual surface detail to them. This is the worst with the M1A1 SMG, where it just looks like it's got a flat slab of grey across the top of it, where there's like no detail to the texture whatsoever. And it feels really strange sometimes. And it's a shame because the environments themselves actually look great. They've got a fair amount of detail to them. There's tons of little objects lying around, some of which you can pick up, some of which you can even throw on top of that. I did this and I found that it's surprisingly easy to kill a Nazi with a playing card from 10 feet away. I have no idea why this is possible, but apparently it's possible. And the actual campaign and set pieces, at least in the first mission of 5 that they've got in the game here, actually pretty fun. They've got a fair few different scenarios for you to work with, a few cutscenes giving you a little bit of background on these characters, although there's a couple of laugh-worthy moments. Like, there's this one cutscene in particular where you're set on you're in the middle of this, like, briefing in this really nice house with polished floors, spotless walls, and some lovely books all over the place. And then one of the French resistance that you're helping out says something along the lines of, he is a traitor, he is French. And then all three of them spit on the floor at the same time. And I can't help but think, why did you do that? Who's going to clean that up? And a couple of other things along those lines which are just kind of laugh-worthy. Like, they're taking themselves seriously, but I just can't help but think of the consequences, and it just makes me laugh. Like how easy it would be to kill the Nazis if everyone had a full deck of cards in their pocket. But anyway. But yes, the graphical fidelity of the game for the most part is actually really good. Facial animations are a little bit weird, the guns are a bit under-textured. Other than that, though, there's a couple of other places where it's kind of weird too. Like, there's this one segment that has you running up a street, trying to get away after alerting the resistance to the fact that you're on the attack. And the street is just completely bare. There's nothing on it. It feels way too clean for being a street in the middle of France, in the middle of wartime. But that's just me. They kind of make up for this by having some absolutely great set pieces, though. The one where you blow the crap out of the train is really nice, where it just rolls over the top of your head. And it's surprisingly impressive, and I just really like watching the train as it went over me. That was a lot of fun. And there was this other set piece as well, earlier on in the campaign, which was a little bit less pronounced, but still a great little idea. You fight your way through this area, you get a decent idea of what it looks like, and then you have to set up an ambush, but you have the opportunity to direct people to where you want them to sit, and you just get to sit up in the middle and watch them act and fire down on people from above. And it's just a nice little bit of extra gameplay on top of the regular shooting. And I really enjoyed the first episode, but it was kind of let down by a couple of things. Because you see, I played the first episode of this the day that it launched. The exact day that it launched, right? There were no patches. Well, not the exact day that it launched. I'm sorry, that's a lie. But there were no patches yet. So I got to sit through a fair few things that most people playing the game now wouldn't have to go through. For example, the loading times. Because good lord, the loading times. This is a 190 gig game, and yet somehow these resources still load slower than a wet week. You often have to sit through, like, 30 seconds worth of loading screens. Then you have to sit through a little inner title telling you what the little part of the mission is and where it's going to go. And then you have to press a trigger to go through that. And then it would bring up a victory screen at the end of that tiny little segment that showed you a tiny amount of things that you want to unlock, whether they be skins for multiplayer characters or stuff from the gallery. Because that you don't get everything from the gallery straight away. I'm honestly not sure why, and that is one of the things they've patched, but I'll get onto that. But that would sit you through a ton of loading times. And it doesn't really help when the game's got as many loading times as it has, when you're just standing there waiting for a small amount of text that says, press trigger to continue to come up before you press on that. I didn't play this game on an SSD like they recommended, because the game's 180 fucking gig, and I don't have that much free on my boot drive right now, and that's the only SSD that I've got. It is legitimately frustrating, but that's not where the problems end. When I played the game on the retail release, no patch, no nothing, there was only one graphical setting for the game, which was the internal render resolution. So it would determine how many pixels it would push out in order to display the game. There was one, which was high, which is what I started on, which is nice and clear, no problem whatsoever. Then there's medium, which is almost unplayable. It starts to look like a PlayStation 2 game. Then there is low, which is completely unplayable and looks like a fucking PlayStation 1 game. It just looks bad. It looks terrible. And I have no idea what convinced them to actually do the game like that, because it just doesn't work, even when I had like a higher internal resolution in comparison to my my headset, right? So it was at like 150% of the resolution of the headset I was using, which by the way was the Oculus Quest 1. It didn't look that much better. even when you put it in medium, because it just didn't look great. It just made it really hard to see everything. It took a little bit of a oomph out of the, whatchamacallit, the set pieces. It just looked bad.
Okay.
Not to mention the game's got some massive performance problems. Now, I will admit, my graphics card is an RTX 2080, which is the absolute minimum they recommend for this game, right? But even on medium, in which the resolution is so low that the game was almost unplayable, I still wasn't able to maintain a solid 72 FPS. Now, 72 is actually quite low for virtual reality. The minimum recommended for virtual reality is 90. At least it has been on PC VR for the longest time, right? But I couldn't even keep 72 regularly. There were missions where the frame rate would pop down to the 30s and 40s. Hell, in one of the quartermaster firing, not firing ranges, they call them like a live fire test, which is basically just a small gauntlet where you have to get to the objective and then get back while killing all the enemies along the way. Even in them, when they were tiny and just like they had nowhere near the graphical complexity as, say, a main mission, I was having dips down into the 20s. The game was becoming completely unplayable, and I couldn't do anything about it. Now, I will point out that they have put out a patch. They have actually put out 2 patches as of this recording. Chances are, by the time that this video goes up, they'll have gone up to 3. But they have done a, hold on a second, sorry. You're not terminating that. Thank you. They have done a couple of patches, and they've added a few things, like the ability to do smooth turning, which wasn't in the original game. They've added a few extra comfort settings. They've added a few extra graphics settings, which is good, because, again, there was basically nothing. And I went in, I fiddled around with them, and I was starting to be a bit more satisfied with the way this game was turning out technically. But, for whatever damn reason, I cannot figure out what the hell is going wrong with this game, but it just crashes all the time. Like, one time I couldn't even get past the main menu, and there were 2 times I would get like 5 steps into the second quartermaster mission, which is directly before the mission that is played, directly before you start playing the next set of story missions, and it would just crash. It would just go straight to desktop with an error saying, sorry, Unreal Engine 4 has crashed, and that was it.
Good thing you had time to stop in here before the plane takes off. Sarge is making sure Ollie is getting...
I haven't been able to figure out what the problem is. I don't know if it's a problem with a specific setting. I don't know if it's a problem with the fact that the patch just didn't go right, but I can't play the game anymore. And I don't know what to tell you. And I have left a message or 2 on the board for the game, but yeah, that's it. I can't play it anymore. And after watching like the first patch come out and being like, okay, it's clear they actually want to, seem to want to do something here. I'll wait and see if they can fix up the bugs, the performance, and maybe add a few extra graphical features and what have you. But after 2 patches, it's gone from I was able to play the game at rough but still playable frame rates to I can't play the game for longer than 10 seconds without it crashing. So, yeah. I don't want to wait any longer. This game's been out for like a full week at this point, and I cannot be bothered. I really cannot be bothered to give them any more benefit of the doubt. This is an absolute mess. And I just want to point out that the things that I talked about earlier, like how you need to press like on the continue thing, you need to wait for the inner titles to pop up before you can press continue. Some of the fact that there's no graphics settings, there's less accessibility settings than there should be. Hell, there's still one missing. The fact that you've got like this little step going on that you can turn on and off, but you can't change that to off or on unless you go play the firing range. And even the fact that they unlocked all the stuff in the gallery straight from the beginning of the game. It just makes me wonder why they didn't do all this in the first place. Did they not get like one person just at random to play through and be like, guys, this is really frustrating. Can we stop this? Can we just simplify this as much as possible? But no, they had to do 2 patches within a week of the game coming out to actually do all of that. and they've still somehow managed to make it worse. And it's a real shame, because I would love to recommend Medal of Honor Above and Beyond, because what I've played of it so far that has worked has been surprisingly enjoyable for a World War II virtual reality first-person shooter. There's a couple of weird details here and there, but there's a couple of things I really like simplifying the firing things, making it so it's really easy to pull a weapon off your back and then automatically get it working with your dominant hand when you're firing with it. Just a couple of other minor things like that that really do a lot to add to the experience. And I've only had time to play like one round of survival and none of the multiplayer. So it's entirely possible that those are great as well. And this is the sort of full-fledged VR experience that we've been looking for, right? But it's just too buggy for me to continue with it in any reasonable time frame. I'll give them like a month. I'm not going to be able to refund the game because I'm already beyond my 2-hour thing on Steam. So that's not great. But the reason why it's 2 hours is because despite the fact that I only really played for like an hour or so, judging by how much of this footage is actually gameplay, you take out the fact that there's a bunch of like loading times to get into the game and all that, and it just gets cut down to like an hour 30 or so. So it looks like the campaign's actually going to be a decent length as well, but still can't play it. So yeah, that's it. Bit of a shorter video than I would normally do, but I've basically got nothing to work with, and I do apologize because I really was looking forward to this game. I wanted to see if this was going to be another one of VR's really heavy hitters, one that would be easy to recommend to anyone who's got the PC to run it and the headset to play it on, but not right now, it's not. This has been Blue Maxima. I'll see you all next time.